better managing their logistical supply chain. But in the interim, you're going to see lots of distortions that go on. Now, we're particularly concerned about on our railroad that those distortions involve people adding inventory onto our tracks that needs to be stored. You know, the old story that we don't know where it's going to go, so we'll just release it on your tracks so you can store it for us. Well, of course, the problem with that, of course, is that gets in the way, and since most of this is in the middle of the coal route or other places, we can't afford to have these things, sitting in the middle of the railroad. So we're going to be very active in working hard with our suppliers and our customers to work on how do we better manage this logistical supply chain. Now, we're in the process of developing new destinations. I'm sure Jack will tell you the same thing. But in the interim, we think you're going to see issues, and we're going to work through them. But fundamentally, the GAO study is incorrect. This is not about rail capacity. There is plenty of rail capacity to haul ethanol, and plenty of rail capacity to haul corn for ethanol. The real issue is just managing efficiently the logistical supply chain. And again, to give you an example, you've got some plants that have over-ordered cars because they don't quite understand exactly what the efficiencies of moving those cars are, and so you've got empty, brand new tank cars sitting around on places, either renting tracks or, and industry tracks tend to be in an immature business not to be insufficient to carry the total need, for instance. And when you're running a processing plant, there's a tremendous incentive to get those loaded cars off your tracks so that you can load more stuff, because you never want to shut down your plant. Unfortunately, you need to have a consistent destination to go to, and so that's going to limit, the efficiency of moving the network. So it's kind of, again, I wanted to bring these things to your attention. We're working very closely with our customers to try and work through this thing. But again, it's not about railroad capacity. Ethanol, we're going to grow from 35,000 cars to 70,000 cars by next year. 70,000 cars out of 1 million cars in total ag. There's a whole lot more additional corn that's going to be moving this year because of the size of the crop in exponential terms than it's about moving ethanol. So I hope some of these comments were helpful.
Corliss.
Okay.
Good morning, Vice Chairman Buttry, Commissioner Mobley. I would also like to express the condolences of the Union Pacific family for Chairman Nottingham and his family in this time of need. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today to discuss how Union Pacific is working to meet the needs of the energy supply chain. We recognize that we play a critical role in meeting the nation's energy needs. Our franchise combines coverage of the key coal and agricultural producing areas of the United States with access to the fastest growing population centers in the United States. While coal and ethanol are vital to the country's economic health, they're also key components of our business strategy. If you look, for instance, at our coal business, that was $3 billion of business. It's roughly 20% of our total $15 billion of business. And while ethanol is a far smaller market than coal for us today, it is our fastest growing line of business. First half of 2007, our ethanol business is up almost 40% over last year. So it's not only important to our customers, we understand that, but it is also critically important to the success of our company. Now, to prepare ourselves to handle this growth efficiently and effectively, we've hired over 14,000 train and engine crews. We've made significant investments in locomotives. We're improving the efficiency of our operations and gaining greater additional capacity through things like our unified plan and our lean management applications throughout our entire network. Our customers are working with us to improve the loading and unloading of their facilities, and technology is helping us to reduce dwell time and improve velocity as well. Last but certainly not least, we're also investing a significant amount of capital to keep this growth flowing. Union Pacific has invested $20 billion in our network since 2000 and nearly $30 billion since we completed our Southern Pacific merger back in 1996. Our 2007 capital plan is $3.2 billion, which is the largest in our history, and I think it's probably the largest anywhere in the U.S. rail industry. As you all know, railroads are very capital intensive. You know, the average U.S. manufacturer reinvests 3.4% of their revenue. In 2006, our capital expenditures were actually 18% of our total revenue. So it's a fairly substantial number. So with that background, let me focus just a little bit on our coal business. At any one point in time, you'll find 400 coal trains moving back and forth over the Union Pacific network. Those 400 trains last year delivered over 260 million tons of coal to customers throughout the United States. The majority of that business originates in the southern Powder River Basin, 17% of it in Colorado, Utah. Growth over the next several years is going to come not only from our existing customers, but also from new plants that are being developed on Union Pacific served territory. If you looked at the map, it would show you that the majority of our existing customers are located in the middle United States, but we have some new opportunities with plants in Nevada and southern Utah that are going to give us our first opportunity, our first significant opportunity to move southern Powder River Basin coal to the west, and we're pretty excited about that. We also think the opportunities are there to move even more coal to the east, but that's really going to depend on the price of and the availability of eastern coal, and then also the import-export markets that also serve those customers. Our coal business has grown dramatically since 1997. Our SPRB tonnage has increased 73%. And one of the enablers of that growth has been a fairly intense focus on productivity, increasing the train size, using distributed power, incenting our customers to invest in high-capacity aluminum cars. It's all resulted in a 19% increase in tons per train out of the Powder River Basin and a 12% increase out of Colorado, Utah. Our trains per day out of the SPRB increased 46%, while Colorado, Utah has increased 16%. And of course, helping to drive that improvement is nearly $8 billion of capital investment since the SP merger that's all been directed towards our coal franchise. Our $3.2 billion 2007 capital plan, of that amount, about $1 billion is focused on our primary coal lines and our network. The map kind of shows you some of those key corridor improvements. Unfortunately, it's going to be a little hard to read, but we're working with the BNSF on 43 miles of new triple track on the north end of the joint line. In addition to that, 31 miles of a new fourth main line over Logan Hill. The importance of those investments is they really start to make major step forward in terms of the projected 490 million tons of coal that should be moving out of the southern Powder River Basin by 2010. So we're investing today to be able to handle the business 3-4 years out. We've added a third main track to our North Platte facility and expanded our bill yard in the joint line so that we can increase the fluid capacity of the railroad. We are in our final year of centralized traffic control signal systems across Iowa. So by the end of this year, we should have double track CTC from the mines all the way to Chicago. And then there's a variety of sidings, passing tracks, and bridge work that we're doing that's all focused on expanding capacity for our coal network. It's important to note that we have continued to make these substantial investments even though a significant portion of our existing base of business moves under legacy contracts. And those contracts today would not justify this kind of capital investment. Even so, we're very much committed to making the investments for a safe, reliable, and efficient delivery system for our coal customers on the belief that when it comes time to expire those contracts, we'll be able to take prices up to market, continue to have productivity improvements that will drive that business towards reinvestable and justify these kinds of investments. Railroads are only one link in this coal supply chain. Meeting the nation's need for coal depends not only on the rails, but also on the mines and on the utilities. Coal supply chain is very tight, and today a hiccup anywhere in the supply chain usually means a missed opportunity for us. Over the past couple of years, all of us have had difficulties dealing with weather, operational problems, and those kinds of issues. Just yesterday, 9 out of the 10 mines that we serve in the Powder River Basin notified us that they were experiencing production problems that would limit the amount of trains we could load. Today, 7 of those 9 told us that those problems are persisting today. And even though when you consider all that, the stockpiles today are about 28% higher than they were a year ago, Union Pacific's year-to-date basis has been able to deliver 93% of demand as reflected in the NCTA forecast process, and we're prepared to handle more. Right now the mines are just having a difficult time mining some of the coal. Recognizing that we're just one link in the supply chain, we're working with mines, we're working with our customers. We talked in the comments about our FLIP program where we set up alternative loading sites. In the case of an unplanned mine outage, the customers have agreed to allow us to load the train someplace else. That helps. It goes without saying, we're working with the BNSF to optimize the utilization of the joint line. We're also working with the mines and the customers, encouraging them to put in the capacity and the track structure that they need from their perspective to see this business continue to grow. So we're absolutely committed to the safe and efficient transportation of coal, and we believe that improving processes used to manage the coal supply today and eliminating those episodic outages is going to allow us to move a lot more coal more efficiently than we do today. Now let me touch briefly on ethanol and other biofuels. We're equally committed to supporting the nation's development, the use of biofuels. We currently serve 50 production facilities throughout the upper Midwest. Ethanol production capacity on UP has increased certainly more dramatically than what the experts had predicted, tripling since 2003. And future production capacity is expected to nearly double over the next couple of years. We have 35 plants today that are either on the drawing boards or in construction just on Union Pacific alone. Just like coal, we're working with shippers and receivers to maximize the efficiency in the ethanol market. We developed our Phoenix Ethanol Terminal Exchange Program, a great example. The program actually benefits non-ethanol customers as well as the ethanol customers because it clears up congestion, and we're looking now to try to replicate that on the origin side of the business. We're working closely with customers to ensure that the new ethanol facilities have the appropriate infrastructure necessary to ensure service to their facility without jeopardizing service to our existing customers by tying up main lines, using them for switching and those kinds of things. We recognize the most efficient way to move ethanol today is by unit trains. By 2008, we expect that about 40% of our business will be moving in unit trains. And we're making the investments not only in the origin side from terminals and track structure, but also on the destination side. We highlighted a couple of examples in our comments, the Dallas-Fort Worth $2 million facility and $5 million up in Selby, California. We think those are all critically important, as Kevin pointed out, to the destination side. We recognize as an emerging market there is some risk associated with this. You don't know how long the government will continue to subsidize ethanol. Don't know what the price of corn will do overall to the market demand, some of those kind of features, and what other kind of biofuels could emerge as an alternative. But we think those risks are relatively minor compared to the demand and the need today to move ethanol efficiently to the marketplace. So we are going to continue to invest. In light of the need for continued investment to support coal, ethanol, and other energy resources, we are very concerned about the near constant drumbeat that exists today for re-regulation of the railroads. Proposed bills currently in the House and the Senate threaten rail service in a variety of ways, but the bottom line is a reduction in railroad revenues is going to cripple the progress that the industry is making towards achieving reinvestability and being able to keep up the kind of capital expenditures you're seeing today. Our board has been willing to commit additional growth capital with the expectation that eventually market rates will provide an adequate return. And the quickest way to choke off capital investment is going to be to re-regulate the railroads. Deregulation has resulted in improved safety, tremendous productivity gains, and at the same time helped the railroads move towards financial sustainability. And we believe that the end result of re-regulation is going to dry up capital. And when capital dries up, then the capacity will go with it over the longer term. It means customers will have to end up shifting to a higher cost operation over the long term. So we're making substantial investments in our infrastructure to create additional capacity to keep up with demand in both of these markets, and we're doing so as long as the investments will justify the returns that we can continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll turn to Commissioner Mulvey for any questions he might have.
Thank you very much, Doug. Jack, you mentioned the problems at some of the mines in the Powder River Basin, and that 7 of the 9 mines were having continuing problems today. Could you be a little more specific as to what those problems are and how they affect your delivery to deliver to your customers?
Sure, and again, I'm just trying to point out that it is a supply chain issue. We've kind of been through an event right now where after a lot of flooding and track structure repairs, the railroads are back up and running, but now the mines are experiencing problems. But they're experiencing problems with machinery, belt. One of them has a difficult time finding the right parts. A couple of the mines are dealing with a lot of the fact that the ground itself has become saturated. And typically it's a very dry environment, so as they move the overburden, it continues to seep back in because it's heavy and wet and those kinds of things. So there are a variety of issues that the mines are dealing with right now, not the least of which is weather.
You mentioned that you meet 93% of your contracts, but a 7% shortfall, especially in an area like coal for electricity, and also given the distribution, it's not 7% across the board, but it's worse in some places than others. And also, I note that some of the utilities have increased their stockpiles. We were out yesterday visiting with Kansas City Power and Light, and they've told us they're more than doubling and tripling what they're holding in stockpiles today. Is that still a problem? Could you roughly guess what percent of that shortfall is responsible by today to the mines versus the problems railroads may continue to have or in their own operations?
You know, for the first 6 months of this year, we have had about 600 missed train opportunities because of the mines. We've had somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 or so as a result of Union Pacific for a variety of reasons, and then there are some smaller misses as well.
Kevin, would you agree that's about the same ratio for you two at the PRB operations?
For this year, by far, it was mine issues, flooding, that affected the delivery of coal. And of
Okay.
course, inventories are building up for, the other side is inventories are building up simply because the weather has been, it's been cooler or it's been warmer in the wintertime.
One of the things that's concerned me about ethanol and the rail carriage of ethanol is that the flows, the commodity flows, will be different from the historic flows of corn to export markets and corn to other end users, and that while there's some capacity in the system right now, metrics seem to indicate that dwell times are down, velocity is up, and the like. If the economy begins to recover and we get to have growth again and we begin to put the system more and more capacity, how does the change in the commodity flows, moving all of these ethanol unit trains in directions and on routes and in, different from what's been typical, affect the overall capacity of the system? I mean, it takes a long time to truly increase capacity, and if this ethanol market grows, as some have predicted, wouldn't that put a real strain on the overall efficiency of the railroad network?
First of all, again, the perspective. Even if ethanol grows to the extent that people say it might grow in the future, you're talking about increasing it to 100,000 units a year, 125,000 units a year. It's less than 0.5% of the railroad's total units. And so while it's incremental business and it's welcome incremental business, it's also business that's going to flow on probably the most efficient part of the railroad. And so really, we don't see ethanol having any real significant impact on our capacity. I mean, we just don't think it's an issue.
Jack, do you agree?
You know, pretty much. I think we've invested, or will invest by the end of this year, about $108 million in capital on ethanol, and we'll run maybe $180 million worth of revenue. So we are investing ahead of it. We view it a little differently in that, you know, for ethanol, you have three things. You have people, you have cattle, and you have grain. So, and those three commodities, those three issues are the same for us in producing food, feed grains, moving corn. So we don't really see the ethanol moving to different locations very much. We're kind of moving to the same locations. It is new facilities, and we want to be smart about making sure that those facilities locate in the right place and they have the right infrastructure. So I don't see that as being a problem. And the places where we are investing is in the origination sites, so that we can, not everybody's going to ship in unit train. We're trying to do sweep trains so we can bring smaller loads together and create a unit train. The destination side, I think it's going to be fine. I don't see it as a major problem for us.
Do you have minimum train sizes you like for the ethanol right now? Obviously, 110-car unit trains would be preferable, but is there any de minimis that you want to require shippers to have?
No, we will move. We'll work with our customers in terms of carloads as well as a unit train.
Single car
Obviously,
trains is what?
carloads can be more expensive because of the infrastructure required, the local infrastructure and the terminal infrastructure required. The 80-car, 100-car unit trains are much more effective and efficient.
Are you generally asking new producers, however, to supply the yard capacity to store the cars for you to pick them up, or especially if they're on the main line?
We are, what we are asking our customers to do is to reflect in their investment decision when you build a $200 million ethanol plant, to make sure that you have the rail structure. And again, it depends on where you locate. We have some customers who unfortunately would like to locate on our triple track main line that runs up to 180 trains a day. For a customer to locate there, we are asking them to put in power switches on both ends and enough track capacity so they can exit that main line at 40 miles an hour, stop the train, do their switching without interfering with the other business. If you move to less populated segments of our railroad, branch lines, or even the short lines, the infrastructure requirements become much less, and that's really more important to us today. We always work with customers in terms of their investment in rail cars. We don't want them to overinvest. We don't want to overpopulate our yards. That has not been a problem for us with ethanol today.
And one last question in this round. Have any of the ethanol producers expressed sticker shock when you've said that this is what is needed for you to for us to serve you?
By all means. We've had some very energetic and enthusiastic discussions about that. And
Nicely put.
we work hard. We work hard at that issue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. To what extent, this is a question for both of you, to what extent are the short lines going to be involved in some of these pulls to the main line from these facilities, or are most of these just locating on very close to main line track where you can just stop and pick them up and move them on?
I mean, that's the investor's choice. I mean, some investors have chosen to locate on the short lines, and they make an eyes-open decision on whether that particular scenario fits better than on another location. And there are places where it does fit. Most of our ethanol plants, I think, are located on our main line or our main branches, but there are plants on short lines.
There's a very small percentage are involving short line operations.
Doug, I couldn't tell you exactly, but I can't. There aren't very many ethanol.
But there is
plants.
some involvement of
Yes.
the short line railroads in these
Right.
in these pulls. What about you?
There is a small number that are short line today, but as we work with our customers and as they understand the infrastructure requirements, that tends to have people now thinking more and more about the opportunity. We view our short line partners as an extension of our network, so certainly locating on a short line is very agreeable to us, and we're more than willing to work with the customers and the short lines to see that kind of economic development take place for our short lines.
When you speak about having capacity on the system, are you including in that capacity power capacity and labor capacity on all these coal and
Yes. Sure.
and biofuels?
Yeah.
So that's an all-encompassing term.
Yeah.
It's not just time on the mainline track.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. I presume all these tank cars that are used for ethanol are privately owned
Correct.
cars, or none of those are owned by the railroad.
That's
They're
correct.
either leased or owned by the
Correct.
producer. There was some information in the written testimony about the use of what would otherwise be called hazardous materials in the process of producing power, and maybe some hazardous materials involved in the production of the biofuels themselves, and the concern about the ability to get those hazardous materials over the system and into the facilities to be used for scrubbing and other similar activities. What's going on with respect to the future of the railroads being willing to carry this hazardous materials into these power plants and so forth to assist in the scrubbing process and the cleaning process of the byproducts?
You're talking about like anhydrous ammonia going into
Yes.
power plants to scrub
Right.
the stacks? Okay.
Right.
Just
I know, of course, there's a huge amount of activity going on in this area in Washington right now about how do you handle this, but if I were a board member on a railroad and I was spending much time thinking about my fiduciary obligations to the board and to the company, I would be very concerned about betting the company on every movement of every train that goes out of the facility carrying a hazardous materials car. And I'm afraid that's sort of where we are at the present time. Someone may be able to convince me otherwise, but if I were a board member, I would be very concerned about my company carrying this material without the proper insurance requirements and protections against